Greetings, brothers and sisters. So, I got some funny things to get to. Bunch of stuff, can't remember it all. But one of the highlights is Brian Stelter has a guest on his show who tells him CNN and he suck, right? Now, some guy who wrote a negative book about Trump goes in on Stelter, and Stelter's reaction is priceless and very telling. So I want to get into all that, but I just want to do the introduction first. And so when you're thinking about a systemic collapse, like it can collapse because of one big event that's like the straw that broke the camel's back or a knockout blow or something that, lingers on, some sort of depression like situation. People in the depression, I mean, within a week it was really bad, right? It was, economic crises for pretty much everyone in America at the time, and just a gloom, like it's a depression, right? A gloom takes over the country, in this case, possibly the world. And until it plays out, nobody really knows what it's going to be like personally, what it's going to be like for everybody, systemically, all these things. And so that's an important thing to know. The timing of it and how it'll play out and what how you'll react personally, how your family members will react, how, society will react. And so that's the biggest thing. Like, that's the most important thing to understand. Like, you don't know how you'll feel, and you don't know how you're going to react, and you don't know how the people in your life are going to react, and then everybody else. In fact, the divine beings that run the system that are, in charge of the spiritual evolution of the human race and the planet, they're not sure how people are going to react. They have the benefit of a cyclical time system, a circular time system, not a linear one. And they can, tune into points on the time system, the timeline. But even those things are subject to change. And so there's a hope that human beings will take the high road, like there always is. But, there's past history and just a long history of bad decisions and heading towards the lower and not embracing the higher. And one thing that's important to know, for people who are just coming aboard this thing, it's not to get obsessed, be a doomsday type of person, just waiting for the doomsday. It's something where we don't know how it's going to play out. Like, it's not, each person has to evaluate what they need to do themselves, but like quitting your job and running out to the woods or something like that, that seems to be unwise, right? Like, I can't, each person has to decide what's best for themselves. But one thing to know is that, like, for people who are waking up, and whatever you want to call it, people saying they're woke, whatever it is, but having this idea that the system's official story and hype and propaganda, because our system is a confidence game. And so when they speak about the system, the politicians and everybody who's, has a microphone in front of them, they complain about the bad apples here or that group over there. And they, Joe Biden saying we have to save the soul of America. I mean, these were sort of more extreme type of statements that were being presented politically. But for the most part, they want to tell you how great the system is. And like Joe Biden now is saying, his economic decisions to rack up another $12 trillion in debt and various types of bailout money and things will ultimately bring down the debt. And, he'll be dead by the time, he's projecting, in 2030, or he'll be, completely incapacitated in 10 years. And so, but people can say, oh, we're spending money now, but that's somehow, we're increasing the debt now, but somehow that's going to bring the debt down later. That's how they talk, right? And they promise things. They have this thing now where things are looming over you. There's doom looming over you a little bit, more than it was, I don't know, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, particularly 5 years ago for, the Trump haters. But it's like this looming, right? A little bit. But for the most part, they want you to believe the system is strong, they have to convince you of that. Now they're starting to, acknowledge there's some, fissures and, there's some holes in the system, right? There's some holes in the foundation, but still there is, this idea that the system is indestructible and we'll get through it and, we'll survive it and the system will, reboot itself or reset itself and it'll be better. Just maybe a little bit of a worse deal. But when you wake up to the fact that they're all liars and that they're running some sort of a scam and, whatever it might be, right? And now that is a new narrative that you're willing to look at, then you're going to see a whole bunch of things you never saw before, like a whole bunch of bad stuff about the system. It just depends on how far you go. And then when you start seeing these things, you're like, oh, this system's horrible. Or, at least it's weak, much weaker than I knew about. And then you start thinking, oh, it might collapse any second, right? And so it's like getting, a diagnosis of cancer. One day you're feeling healthy and, don't have much of a care in the world. Maybe you have a few issues, but you think they're, minor. And then you get this diagnosis and you realize, oh, man, I might die, right? And then all of a sudden everything changes. Your perspective changes. And that happens to people when they first wake up and they're like, oh, this is way worse than I thought. And they start like panicking and freaking out and thinking, the doomsday is going to be tomorrow, right? And it might not be for, 100 years. I don't know. Like, I don't think I think it'll be a lot sooner than that. But in terms of, all these things that are, going to unfold, that will bring the system down. And some of those things are, natural things, acts of God, acts of nature. Like I said in an earlier video, really what I'm waiting for is these events to unfold and then see how I'm going to react and other people are going to react and what it's going to be like after those events, right? When you have a big event in your life, what is it like after? And so, this is something for people to focus on. You can prepare for it, and everyone should prepare for it in one way or another. But there are a lot of people who they've already made their decision that, if the system collapses, they're just out, right? They're not, they're not even going to try. They're like, they'll ride the thing to the end of the system. And, part of it is just, taking this time where you have free time and you can prepare, and we have a lot more things you can buy and, whatever it is, tools and things like this. There's, you can take advantage of what we have now that won't be available later, right? But each person has to assess this for themselves. And then you have to kind of, get an understanding of what's going to happen with the people in your life. Because there's many relationships that won't survive the apocalypse, right? People are in crappy relationships, weak relationships, with people who just don't, have it in them to survive this thing, to, reboot themselves, and they're just not into it. They're sort of dead inside, and the relationship's kind of dead, but, it's convenient, or it's, too much of a hassle to get out of it, or whatever it is, right? People have these kind of things. They're dead relationships, family stuff or whatever it is, and they won't survive the apocalypse or even some of the events. They just won't, some kind of big event, they won't survive it, right? They, they're just lingering or they're lingering on and just, waiting for something just to pull out the truth of the matter to, illuminate the truth that the relationship is dead, right? Just to pull it out into the light and show you, like everybody knows it, but you're just, not really willing to admit it or whatever it is. And the apocalypse is going to be one of those things, obviously. And so, like I said before, you don't know how you're going to react until it happens, because for some people, they might seem like sheeple now. They might be completely asleep, but something will kick in when the apocalypse happens, especially for maybe younger people who have a lot of, more energy and fight and, a lot left on their life. They're still early on in their life, and maybe they're depressed and whiny and entitled right now, and, they don't seem like good candidates to survive the collapse of the system, but, something will kick in, right? Some kind of thing, and they'll just be like into it, and they'll be like, completely transformed person. The apocalypse will pull things out of people. When people go to war, for example, war is probably the best example of this. But when you work in intense environments like a prison, or you're a cop, or you're, whatever you are, right? You go into a situation, you go to some foreign country that's in crisis mode, like you go, it's like, I don't know, the Peace Corps or something, and you travel around the world and you experience a totally different, level of intensity and crisis. You go to some war-torn country, or, you're in a war as a soldier. I mean, this is one of the reasons soldiers suffer psychological issues, because the war pulls out of them things they didn't know were there, negative things often, like things that they do in war because of the intensity and because of the, the death and the violence and all these things, and they do things, and then later they return to civilization and they just, right, there's a schism between the kind of person that emerged when they were in the war situation and what they have to go back to when they return home, right? And so it's a shock to their system. It's like things got pulled out of them because being in a war type situation. And so you don't know. People don't know what they're going to be like, how they're going to react to an apocalyptic situation. And you don't know what's going to happen in terms of people coming into your life. I mean, when there is a systemic breakdown, the only way to survive is to have some sort of a support system, because, you're dependent on the system now, the overall system. And then what are you going to have in terms of, like, when that's not there and the people in your life just aren't up to the challenge? For people who are going to survive it, things are going to have to change, right? Opportunities are going to have to be there, and, there's going to have to be things opening up for a pathway for you to survive, right? It's not something that's going to be within people's control, although, you have to embrace what's going to happen, and there has to be a point to it, right? Because your goals are going to change. The reasons for your existence are going to change, because a lot of those things are tied to the system now. Your purpose, your goal, your life's work is tied to the system as it is now, and the system goes, then you no longer can achieve those goals. Those things aren't there anymore. So you have to, adapt and evaluate why you're going to keep on going. It's going to be a choice for people. Like a real, slap in the face, because people just get into their mundane routines and their rut, and, you go to work and you watch TV, and you just, time's passing you by, and you have, celebrations and birthdays, whatever it is, and you're with your family, and you just kind of get into this rut and routine, and then, you don't really make much of a choice, and then something big happens. You get diagnosed with something happens to one of your people you love, and there's a shock to your system or whatever, or then there's a big scale collapse, and then, something some fight in you, I don't want to say fight, maybe as I don't know, something in you that's like, I want to live, I want to survive, I want to, I need to. There's a purpose now. Or you're just, like what kind of person are you going to be then? Like you were a person in one, like, level of a video game, but now you're in a whole different level. And maybe you're a person that you had all this hidden potential that was being suppressed by the controlled system. And when the system collapses, a whole nother, version of you emerges because of the circumstances. I've talked about some scars before, and all of it, so, I mean, putting yourself in the best possible position, not being obsessed with it, because it's just going to happen when it happens, but also, preparing or whatever on a material level. And you can always deepen your connection to God. That's always good. Finding your soul's path now, and then when the apocalypse happens, and then after it, right? Whatever it is, like that's always a good thing. Always deepening your connection, finding out your soul's path, and embracing that. Most people are, just shut off from that. Most people are not in the flow of their life. All right, so I want to come back to this maybe at the end of the video, but let's go to Brian Stelter, because it's just platinum. So Brian Stelter got rolled up on his old show, and he handled it really poorly, just completely embarrassing. So this guy, Michael Wolff, that did another book about Trump, right? And this guy isn't really a truth teller. He's obviously, left wing or whatever, but he just destroys CNN and Stelter on his own show. And it's absolutely hilarious.
Point was in any way inauthentic. I think the media has done a terrible job on this. I think you yourself, while you're a nice guy, you're full of
I'm full of what? Full of what? It's an S word coming. He's full of an S word coming up, you know. And who's to say he's a nice guy? Like, what do you mean he's a nice guy? He's not, you know. I mean,
While you're a nice guy, you're full of sanctimony.
oh, sanctimony. I knew it was an S word. Look at Brian Stelter's fake smile. Now, I've talked about this before. I got away from it. How sanctimonious they are. How they just such care about all the people and Trump supporters and the people on the right and the people in the truth community, all these crazy conspiracy theorists. They are just hurting people left and right. Just the sanctimonious stuff. I mean, that's one of the great descriptive words of CNN and MSNBC and the left politicians. People who aren't nice people and don't really care about people being sanctimonious.
You become part of one of the parts of the problem of the media. You come on here and you have a monopoly on truth. You know exactly how things are supposed to be done.
A monopoly on truth, right? So this guy just came on and pitched his book for like 8 minutes about Trump, and then he's, he got his sales pitch in. And he's just rolling up CNN, the monopoly on truth, the sanctimonious. I mean, it's just an absolute beatdown.
You are one of the reasons people can't stand the media. Sorry.
You're cracking me up.
In the category for the fakest laugh of the year, the Oscar goes to Brian Stelter.
Sorry.
You're cracking me up.
Sorry.
You're cracking me up.
Sorry.
You're cracking me up.
So there's a little bit more to that. Because Brian Stelter, his ratings have plummeted. And CNN's ratings have plummeted. They had the Trump ticket where people were tuning in because they were freaked out about Trump. And they were just, they were into the Trump drama. I'm talking about liberals and Democrats. And now that Trump's gone, they have no ratings. JoJo doesn't inspire. He's a snooze. They're not covering JoJo in a way that would be humorous or great. And so they're still trying to exhume Trump, but most of the people, that used to watch CNN don't really care about it. And Brian Stelter, he shouldn't even have a show based on his ratings and his ability to, be a so-called journalist. And so when he laughs when the guy says, you're one of the reasons that people don't tune into CNN, it's because it stings.
You are one of the reasons people can't stand the media. Sorry.
You're cracking me up.
It's your fault.
So what should I do differently, Michael?
Well, we just saw what you did there, right? You laughed when something's not funny. Your ratings are abysmal. You're unwatchable, right? I mean, only if you're going to mock the guy is he watchable. And then he laughs like, oh, that's so funny. That the very idea that he is one of the reasons people can't stand the media, oh, that's so funny. Oh, that's such a joke. You're cracking me up. And then, well, what can I do different? Well, if it's funny, you wouldn't ask that question, right? If it was funny, you wouldn't say, what can I do different? Because you're saying it's so laughable that you would be a reason people can't stand the media. Just what you did there, right? I mean, the answer to your question is you'd have to be a entirely different person. You're annoying as a person, as is most of the other people on the mainstream news. You're just annoying. Like even if it was just a conversation at a party or whatever it was, right? If you were ordering coffee, you would piss off the barista, right? Like they just can only stand like a couple minutes of you.
It's your fault.
So what should I do differently, Michael?
Don't talk so much. Listen more. People have genuine problems with the media. The media doesn't get the story right.
Even here, he has a smirk. Like, right? He's being sanctimonious and condescending, even in this like little clip here. And he's looking like, somebody would be yelling at you and you look at them with a smile on your face. You just provoke even more rage from them, right? He's being told the truth here. nobody watches CNN anymore. The ratings suck. The news in general isn't being watched, so much so that they have to find ways to censor people and, ban them or deplatform them on social media and rig the algorithms of search engines so that CNN comes up, the so-called authoritative news comes up, even though it sucks or even though people don't want to watch it. The customers are right. We don't want to watch you because you suck, right? And they're no longer competing. They're not competing with me. They're not competing with people on social media. Regular comedians aren't anymore. Like late night talk show hosts and the rest of them, they're just being like, they're getting network welfare, right? They're being subsidized because by their advertisers and the networks because it's just propaganda. They no longer are competing, or they no longer they no longer try to put out something quality, and they just look with these smirks on their face as everybody tells them they suck on a daily basis, whether it's the ratings, whether it's people like me, whether it's even his own guest who's there to pitch his book, right? And he just looks there with that smug look on his face.
The media exists in its own bubble.
That's true. I agree.
You got to stop. I mean, that last segment that I just had to listen to, of all of the people saying the same.
Look at that frickin' ghoul hole. He's right. Like, these segments are hard to get through. I usually turn on the news when I eat lunch. I eat very fast, or eat breakfast. And I watch a few minutes of news, and it's just so bad. I have to thumb through the channels, and I could have 8 stories. I could make 8 videos or segments of videos on anything I see. It's so deceptive. It's so evil. It just sucks. It's hard to sit through. And he's laughing like the guys, how ridiculous. Of course everyone would love to sit through one of my segments.
You got to stop. I mean, that last segment that I just had to listen to, of all of the people saying the same old stuff. Also, you're incredibly repetitive. It's week after week. I mean, you're the flip side of Donald Trump. Fake news, and you say virtuous news.
No,
there's
we just figure out what is
here.
real.
I mean,
yeah, I'm listening.
Did you just hear this MNF? He's being just obliterated here. And 90% of the people in America probably get it. I mean, I don't understand what would make somebody watch CNN and take it serious. Like, I can't even understand that level of consciousness. I don't even know how that person's able to function in the world. That they turn on CNN and it's over their head, or they say, oh man, they really nailed it. Like someone who can't see through Brian Stelter and CNN. But do you hear what this MNFer said? We just figure out what is real. Now, that's really arrogant, and it goes against everything the guy's telling them, right? The guy's telling them the truth, and this isn't some, brilliant man. He's just, he's just seeing what's obvious, right? And Brian Stelter has the cojones to say, the truck nuts to say, we just figure out what is reals, right? Which is, of course, false, but it also flies in the face of everything we know about CNN and what the guy's telling them.
We just figure out what is real.
I mean,
we just figure out what is real.
I mean,
we just figure out what is real.
I mean,
I'm listening.
Well, figuring out what is real is not so easy, and
right.
Most people don't want to turn to Brian Stelter to tell us what's real. I'm sorry.
Doesn't sound like you're sorry. It sounds like you realized that no one was going to watch this interview, and it sounds like you knew you needed a viral moment to sell your book, and you kind of know that people are bailing. The Trump haters are now like they've been satisfied, right? Their hatred, their anger for Trump is dissipated, and now they're just sort of checked out. And so that's what always happens, right? They were completely riled up for the last 5 years with Trump being the demon, the dragon that had to be slain, but now he's gone. And so everyone else is seeing how bad the news is, and people are, mainstream culture is hemorrhaging its viewership and its interest from people. And so he realized he needed a viral moment. He knew that no one's watching this crappy video, and he needed to, restore some credibility because CNN sucks. And so he just, laid it out on Brian Stelter that no one wants to hear reality from Brian Stelter.
Well, then why'd you bother coming on CNN a few times this week?
I'm a book salesman.
He's a book salesman. That's just wonderful. A little bit of honesty. He has to go to CNN to sell his crappy books, and I don't know who's going to buy them. But, that was a wonderful piece of honesty on various levels. And so we know CNN sucks, and Brian Stelter he's being like condescending with his smirks and all these things, and just a complete tool. And CNN has lost any credibility of being finding the real story, right? I mean, it's just, this is a wonderful moment. And even though it's not some deep truther moment, there's truth in it. Dolly Parton poses in Playboy outfit for her husband's birthday. He still thinks I'm a hot chick. And allegedly. And so this was covered also by the New York Post. And Dolly, who's had an awful lot of plastic surgery, decided to post this on Instagram.
Hey.
Hey.
Today is July 20. It's my husband Carl's birthday.
Carl. Happy birthday, Carl.
And you're probably wondering why I'm dressed like this. Well,
No, we're not wondering at all. The Playboy outfit, the bunny ears, and, I've talked about bunny ears in so many of my old videos. It has a lot of significance with Alice in Wonderland and all these things to do with, even the god Eastora. And so bunny ears is a big thing. It's got a lot of mind control and other type of occultic symbolism. And, it's also these women who were considered, the objectification of women in Playboy, but also sort of the slave stuff. And then the weird bow tie. Again, I talked about this with Britney Spears. You often see some sort of a choke collar, something that keeps usually a woman, but sometimes a man from talking, this sort of collar, and just a weird outfit, right? Hugh Hefner was a very strange person, and there's like 10 to 12 tragic playmate deaths and suicides and things. I've covered that in the past. This one playmate referred to Hugh Hefner as the devil, and the devil in the world of mind control, the devil is the handler. And her, cause of death was questionable, and, weird death scene at her house, suspicious death scene. And there was pentagrams all over her house and things. She had a thing with Bill Cosby as well.
it's for my husband's birthday. Remember, some time back, I said I was going to pose on the Playboy magazine when I was 75. Well, I'm 75, and they don't have a magazine anymore. But
because, the internet.
my husband always loved the original cover of Playboy, so I was trying to think of something to do to make him happy. He still thinks I'm a hot chick after 57 years, and I'm not going to try to talk him out of that. And I hope he agrees. What do you think?
Okay, that's enough of Dolly. The thing goes on. Chrissy Teigen says she could be canceled forever. Forever?
Feel like this forever, 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 ever, forever, ever.
There's Chrissy Teigen on TMZ with a face mask.
About Cancel Club, how long do you think you're going to be in it?
I don't know. Could be forever.
Could be forever. She's going to be in the Cancel Club forever. Bunch of people try to take selfies with her, and then she says something that...
It's a secret club. We don't talk about it.
Society. All we ask is trust. All we ask is trust.
They said it's a secret society, the Cancel Club.
Courtney said that you haven't reached out to her. Why do you think Courtney keeps saying that?
Anyways, I don't even know why I bothered. She'll be back in some form or another. She'll still suck. So I very seldom watch network television. And I had the basketball game on, but I recorded it, but somehow I left the ABC channel up, and I was turning off the TV, and this guy was talking about Jeff Bezos. He's hosting, guest hosting for, I guess his name is Anthony Anderson. I've seen him some movies. He's on some TV show. But he's actually a little bit funny, like for a mainstream. I don't know if he's a comedian or what, but he rips Jeff Bezos here pretty good.
All over the world looked up and said, wow, that thing sure looks like a piece. And that's because that thing did look.
This is Jeff Bezos' rocket.
And that's not all. He exited the rocket wearing a cowboy hat. Boy.
This is absolutely spectacular.
Nothing says midlife crisis like putting on a cowboy hat and blasting off to space in a giant metal.
So there's that. Jeff Bezos is going to cover that, but they've now, privatized space. We have billionaires and trillionaires going up to space and people paying to privately go up to space. Again, this is a new movement where it's no longer governments, it's corporations that want to take control of space. Luckily, we have Space Force up there. So finally, there is a trailer with a movie called The Last Duel that's based in a true story.
I am telling the truth. The truth does not matter.
The truth does not matter.
There is only the power of men.
This should be settled.
There's only the power of men.
Quietly.
I'm innocent!
He's innocent. He's accused of R-ing Matt Damon's wife, and they're best friends.
I request a duel to the death.
Matt Damon wants to duel him to the death.
If you lose, your wife will suffer dire consequences.
Dire consequences. If he loses the duel, his wife will be proved.
One of us is
He threw down the glove.
Let us let God decide.
You do not believe me.
I am risking my life for you.
You are
He's risking his life for her.
risking my life so you can save your pride.
He's just trying to save his pride. He's got a scar. One woman went with the inverted cross.
The penalty
The inverted cross.
for bearing false witness.
The penalty for bearing false witness. What's this going to be? This is why I'm adding this.
Is that you are to be burned alive.
And so again, this is based in some sort of true story in France. And it is there's this duel between this husband and this his best friend, who she accuses of abusing her. And if her husband loses, that means that she is guilty of bearing false witness against her husband's friend, and the punishment for bearing false witness for accusing a man of something he didn't do was being burned alive. That's I talked about that. This is one of the things I've been talking about in videos with King James, who was, burning women alive, witches, because they wouldn't, pagan women that he called witches, because they wouldn't convert to Christianity. So I just thought it was odd, right? This actually happened. I mean, this is, not that many years ago. This happened in Europe and other places, I guess.
I will not be silent.
The Last Duel. It looks epic. I've been having a really good bunch of days of getting work done at the farm, and my son and I were out doing the fence today. We were building this fence, and we did okay at the end of the summer. I mentioned it was really hard to dig, and we've gotten more rain this summer, so the fence pole holes aren't so hard to dig, and we've made some adjustments based on the cost of wood, and it's going to make things go faster. We're going to use barbed wire instead of boards on top. I mean, it's just an economic, and we just want to get the thing done. But a bunch of other projects we got going on. I had a really good day at work yesterday. My energy level has increased. Like, I feel relatively good all the time now, a lot better than I did last summer. But anyways, I've been in and out all day, and so making the video. And I just, going back to the introduction, well, I want to say one thing more about the CNN thing. Well, all four of the things I covered today and cover every day. So CNN sucking, like the news just out and out being exposed as just absolutely sucking, right? So many people know. See, this is four new things, four things that are recent. There's something that are relatively new. So the first one is CNN just absolutely sucks, and most people know it, right? Most people are aware of it, that the news is propaganda and disinformation and psychological operation, whatever it is. Most people don't trust it. And it's just laughable. It's become a joke. And news anchors used to not be opinionated. They would just ask questions, and they wouldn't be the story. Now they're the story, and it's a bad story. They're not funny or interesting, and their opinions suck, and they're manipulative. They're sanctimonious. They're, how dare you, sir, right? All this stuff. I mean, they're just, they're giving their opinions, and they're having emotional reactions. They're breaking down and crying on the news now, the anchors themselves, in a fake way. I covered this in a whole another video. The CNN anchors crying. And the majority of people know the news sucks. I mean, it's just, they get maybe 20 million views total across all the networks. And, I mean, in terms of the population, most people don't get their information from the news anymore. And, that's just something that's new, right? It's a breakthrough that people have had. They have enough consciousness to realize the news sucks. It's not legitimate. And, anybody with any sort of a pulse and any conscious awareness, in a triple-digit IQ can kind of see through the news. And then you have this thing with Dolly Parton, and, this weird thing, Playboy's gone out of business, right? There's no Playboy magazine because the internet's saturated by really graphic porn and the whole weird MK Ultra stuff that had to do with Playboy, and I've talked about that in previous videos, but she's posting this video on Instagram. A 75-year-old woman gets dressed up in a Playboy costume and says she's, doing this on Instagram for her husband. Like, she could have just done that privately, dressed up like that, right? For her, old husband. But she decided to post it on Instagram. So there's this whole new thing that's happened. I mean, Instagram models and the way that people market themselves. And then, Chrissy Teigen getting canceled from that, right? Where people are making a living by being influencers and, celebrities, but everyone else, has some sort of Instagram or Facebook account or a YouTube channel. And, all those things are relatively new and now getting canceled, where people will do something or say something in the public forum, or something will be dragged out of their past, and then they'll be canceled in some way, where they can no longer go out on the internet. Either they're deplatformed, or they just will be shamed to death by the ravaging, the horde of trolls out there, right? And see, these are all new things, and then you have this complete tool, in Jeff Bezos earning $1 trillion on his internet business, or, being the CEO of Amazon, and using that money to go up into space, right, as a private person. And so you think about all these changes, and this is just a few of them. And then, you think about all the things that they've redefined and the way that they've changed the social structure and social etiquette and the culture and, people wearing masks and the country being shut down last year, the economy being, shut down because of COVID and all these things, or whatever the real reason is. And just all of these changes, dramatic changes, have taken place, and they're not good. They're not sign of a stable society, a society that is, doing well. Like a lot of it goes against God, a lot of it goes against the natural order of things. But one of the biggest things is it's causing conflict, and people are, most people don't agree with it, and you have divisions, racial divisions, the battle of the sexes, and I mean just the left and the right, and just people coming apart. I've talked about this being the year of the schism. And based on all this, you wouldn't think we're getting farther away from the apocalypse, right? I mean, we're just every day one day closer to the end of civilization as we know it, whatever that means, right? The collapse of our society. And if you go to, ancient ruins, you can find these ancient cities, some of them beautiful, some of them, magnificent, and now they're just in shambles, right? They're rubble. And the culture and the governments and all of it has collapsed. Languages have disappeared, right? Whole, cultures of people, whole races and tribes of people are now extinct. They're gone forever. And, the cities have gone, the civilizations have gone away. And so that's going to happen here at some point. And it's just a matter of when. And we look at what's going on in our society, it's like we're free falling, not just because of all the changes, but it's because of the kind of changes they are. And they just seem to be all going in the wrong direction. And so personally, I've always grown up knowing that there might be some sort of collapse of our civilization. Like I just never really got it. I never really got what it was like to be an American. Some of it's because I'm introverted, some of it's because I'm dyslexic. It's such a hard word to pronounce. It's like a big F you to dyslexic people. I mean, how many words have they start with a DYS and have an X in them, right? And, it's just an absolute F you to dyslexic people. But anyways, I have, whatever past lives and things, and I just really never fit in or understood the American culture. Of course, my brother, he had come back from Vietnam, and he knew a lot of these original truther narratives about the Federal Reserve, and, he guarded the poppy fields in Vietnam and knew, soldiers woke up in Vietnam. In fact, my brother was, he was coming driving a limousine, and there was a general, like he drove limousines for a while from Connecticut to New York City, and there was a general in the car with him. Guy was really drunk, and he said, "Oh, you're a veteran?" My brother said, "Yeah." He goes, "Vietnam?" He goes, "Yeah." And he said, "We didn't plan for any of you guys to survive." The guy was drunk, right? And so he said, basically that they thought all those soldiers, because they don't want to pay for the benefits, they don't want to, they talk about how much they love soldiers and praise them for their service, but once they've been in war, businesses don't want to hire them. It's a hard time. It's hard for soldiers to come back from a war and readjust into society. I said this either today or in another video yesterday. I'm not sure when. It's a real hard thing for them to do, and so they don't. And then they have to pay for them. There's so many. They owe the soldiers all these things: free health care and some, material compensation and whatever it is. And so they don't, and with the Agent Orange and all these things. And so, that's how they treat people that they praise, right? That they say, oh, it's the ultimate sacrifice to serve your country. And yet they don't treat the soldiers with that same kind of, respect, right? So anyways, I read stuff in the Heartfulness System, Whispers of the Brighter World. And before that, the book Reality at Dawn. And there was these prophecies and, this idea that the future world would be built on the bones and ashes of this world, and that America was on the verge of paupery. I mean, this was written years ago, and these various, predictions and prophecies, and the need for a spiritual awakening, and the materialistic society of today was going to have to collapse, and all the things that I picked up on before. And I realized that, when you're in a society, you're in a culture, you're in even a village-based system, or a family even, eventually it's going to collapse, right? It's going to get absorbed. And I watched this thing on the Nature Channel. They were following a pride of lions. And there was a time where the pride of lions was kicking ass. They had, a couple of strong males at the head of the pride, and they had a bunch of good female lions, lionesses that were good at hunting, and They were thriving. They had a lot of lion babies. And then, they lost some of their female lions, and the 2 male lions ended up getting killed by 4 young male lions that were roaming around. And the young male lions didn't want to take over the pride. So the lionesses were left by themselves. And the one that was the best hunter, she was sort of the matriarch, gets kicked in the head by a zebra. And she's like not right after that. And then they were just killed by other lions, right? Eventually. Some other prides of lions came in, just wiped them out. And I was like, that's effed up. Like what I just watched. But like that's, societies and cultures and governments and things. I mean, there's an ebb and flow to it, and eventually they collapse. Like you have your heyday, and then, people get more and more entitled and they lose their hunger. I mean, that's one of the reasons there's immigrants. I mean, people always get mad at the immigrants, and you hear people who are anti-immigrant or whatever it might be, people coming in from other countries. But the reason they're coming in and the reason people want them is because they're hungry and they'll work, right? They're going to work harder, and they just come from a worse circumstance, and they want to be in America, where Americans just feel entitled to it and think it's their God-given privilege, all of us, right, to some extent. And we don't have that same level of, drive as it is that people grow up in poverty and war-torn countries and things, things that we've never experienced. And so until we experience those types of things that happen in apocalypse, a system collapsing, a martial law, whatever happens in our country, real big changes, not having electricity all the time, not having food in the grocery stores, having maybe soldiers of a foreign country in our, occupying our country or whatever it is. Until we experience those, we don't know how we're going to handle those experiences. That's what I was saying in the beginning of the video. It's something for people to understand, because it's going to pull something out of you. It might pull the quitter out of you. It might pull the fighter out of you. It might pull the homesteader out of you. I mean, it's going to be changes. There's things inside of you. This is the idea of some scars in the heartfulness system. It's like a program, a dormant program inside of you that gets activated. And then all of a sudden you go into another direction, and you don't know what kind of strengths inside of you, what you're capable of. And, you won't know that for the people that you're with, right? You won't know that with, your loved ones and how they're going to handle it. Like, how are they going to handle the collapse of the system? Are they going to check out? Are they going to, go nuts? Are they going to be just angry all the time and, whatever? I mean, it's going to be, it's yet to be determined. Years ago, when my first marriage and my family built a couple of homesteads, and it was a little bit rough, and I wanted to, get this thing going. It was different. It was a counseling system back then, what I'm doing here now on this YouTube channel. But I wanted to do this first and then do the homestead once there was, a good solid income and a way to earn money from home. But it's not the way that went, and there's a whole story behind that. But I accepted it, and, it just sort of took off, doing the homesteading, milking cows, and, getting chickens and putting in fence and scything grass and learning how to do all these types of old things, making cheese and processing the milk and butter and things like this. And, learning all these sort of basic primary work, right? Work that's called primary work. I think that's the right term. And that's like, stuff that you have to do for, making food or making clothes or things that essential to your life. Because most of the work that we do isn't primary. We get money for the work we do, and somebody else does the primary work for us, and then we go to the store and buy food or whatever it is. And so, it was a little bit early, but it was the right time to do it because, I have some experience now, and now, I remarried and my kids are older, and we're doing some homesteading here. My kids are, sort of semi into it, and we'll see what happens in the future. Like they're, they don't really see the need, and they're not as convinced as I am about what's going to happen, right? And so everyone has to come to terms with that as it unfolds, and then you have to, figure out what you're going to do. But to have some sense of it, right? And this is what the heartfulness meditation helps people, you just start adjusting in a natural way internally and have some sort of sense of what's going to happen and what you're going to need to do. Like, because there's going to have to be changes. We're all going to have to adapt, right? Like I said, you might be in a relationship now that's just limping along, but as long as you're supported by society and you have your distractions of the internet and TV and, you have separate jobs and you don't spend much time with each other, and it would just be a lot maybe worse and harder to be, alone, right? And even with, the support system and being in a routine, the stress is pretty high, and, you can't take much more. The relationship couldn't take much more stress or, some big events. And so when things start collapsing, it just will never, it just won't withstand that sort of a situation. And then you have to, evaluate this as you move forward, right? Finding people that have skills and something to offer, because in the future there's no dead weight, right? It just isn't. Like in a situation where the system isn't there for you anymore and everybody is just, learning how to survive and to, cope with all the changes that are befalling them, there's no dead weight in that situation. There's no people just laying around, not contributing and things. I mean, that's, everyone's going to have to step up their level of contribution and their level of, just about pretty much everything to compensate for the loss of the beast that we're 100% dependent on. And, I mean, it should be pretty obvious to everybody, right, that there's like some truth to what I'm saying here. There's lots of signs of the collapse, and that's, whatever that is. And, we are wherever we are, and then things are going to go in whatever direction it goes, and then things are going to get harder and different. Just a lot of things will be different, and things that we used to rely on will no longer be there, and then we have to, make our adjustments and things and, kick our addictions and connect to God on a deeper level. I mean, that's always something you can do because, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.